I remember when I finally went to my crush's place, I was super excited. But then out of nowhere, my crush ends up telling me, oh, my room's downstairs in the basement. Do you want to like go down there? Yeah, sure. Wait, why is your room in the basement? Oh, because I get more like privacy. Like, here, just follow me. And at that moment, when we went down the steps of the basement, out of nowhere, I ended up smelling this awful smell. And then when I looked at her room, I instantly regretted going to my crush's place in the first place. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another insane, but I gotta say crazy story. So today's story all takes place back when I was in high school, and this was my grade 9 year. Now in grade 9, there was a girl that was in my biology class that I had a major crush on. Like, I cannot explain how much of a crush I had on this girl, but she was known as Miss Perfect. From having blonde hair, blue eyes, and on top of that, she looked amazing like 24/7. I remember back when I was in high school, I thought this girl would be the girl of my dreams. But I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was a real helpless romantic back when I was in grade 9. And I remember throughout the school year, every time I entered biology class, I always ended up staring at her or just being some sort of weirdo. And 100%, there was no way I thought she would be interested in me. Until one day, I remember in my biology class, we ended up getting an assignment to make an atom. If you guys don't know what an atom is, well, figure it out on a different channel because I'm not here to teach you science. But basically, one thing led to another. I remember our teacher walked up to the board and she basically started writing names down of students in the class. She ended up pairing us on her own because she always knew that we ended up choosing our own friends and never get the work done. So she thought it would be smart to basically pair us up in different groups. I remember as I was watching the board and writing everyone's name, I ended up seeing her write my crush's name and my name was right beside her. And at that moment, I started to freak out. In my mind, I was thinking, no way. Like, she actually wrote my name. Wait, I'm paired up with my crush. No way, dude. And I started to freak out and basically get super excited. And when my crush saw my name on the board beside hers, she ended up just looking at me. And I think that was the first time she actually stared at me without thinking I was some sort of weirdo. I know it sounds really sad, but just keep listening because the story gets more insane. Because I remember after the teacher ended up writing all the names on the board, she ends up basically walking up in front of us and says, okay, class, so this is your partners for the atom project. I want everyone to basically get together and start planning. At that moment, I ended up walking up to her desk and I said, hi. So we're doing the project, right? Yeah, we got paired up for it, obviously. At that moment, I was super nervous. And by the way, back when I was in grade 9, I had a massive stutter, like to the point where it was really, really bad. So every time I tried to communicate with her, I tried to think what I was going to say before I actually said it. But honestly, it never ended up going out well because every time I looked at her, I would just get super nervous and honestly just butterflies in my stomach. I remember over time though, me and her, we ended up finally planning out what we wanted to do. But since we ran out of time in that class from me being so dumb and nervous, she ends up telling me, oh, Bubba, do you want to just like come over to my place and like just get the project done quick? Wait, what? Yeah, like you can just come over. You want me to come over to your place? Yeah, you never been to a girl's house before? At that moment, I kind of stood there frozen and I kind of got excited and I said, yeah, I'll be there. I remember when I walked out of the classroom that day, I was so in shock about being invited over that I ended up basically going up to my friends in the cafeteria at lunch and basically told them the news. They all ended up looking at me in disbelief and they're like, bro, there's no way you're going out with one of the hottest girls in school, bro. Like, are you serious? Yeah, dude, like, I don't know how it happened. It just happened, I guess. Like, it's fate. Okay, Bubba, it's not fate. The teacher just assigned you guys both. Relax, dude. Just go to her place and, you know, see what you can do. I remember as the school day went on, as the final class of the school day ended up happening, I ended up going to the bathroom and I ended up staring at myself in the mirror, trying to give myself a motivational speech to basically, you know, make sure I had the confidence to actually go to this girl's place. And as I'm looking at myself in the mirror, basically telling myself that I am the tiger, I am the animal, I am the master. Out of nowhere, a student walks in and says, dude, are you good, bro? Like, what's wrong with you? Nothing. I'm gonna go. Crazy enough, he was a senior in high school that played for the rugby team, and there are more stories about him later in the future, but we'll talk about him in another video. Going on though, I remember when the bell finally rang, I ended up running straight to my crush's locker. Well, I didn't run, I more like sprinted, but you know what? Like, we're just gonna act like it was normal. And when I finally walked up to her, I said, hey, like, you ready to go back to yours? Huh? Oh yeah, just give me real quick. Let me just powder my nose. I remember she ended up putting makeup on her face, and me and her, we ended up walking together outside of the school, and everyone was staring at us. I am not joking. Everyone was definitely staring, thinking, bro, what is Bubba doing with that girl? But honestly, I didn't care. Me and her, we ended up going in her mom's car, and her mom was a really nice, sweet lady. But one of the things she ended up saying was, honey, did you end up cleaning the basement? What, mom? Yeah, obviously I cleaned it. 100% she didn't clean it because the way her voice started shaking made me realize that she was definitely lying to her mom. But hey, a little mess never hurt anybody. At least so I thought. Because when we finally got to her place, I remember I ended up seeing her bedroom that she would always post photos in online about, and she had a really nice clean bedroom. But right as I was about to walk into it, she says, oh, don't go in there. That's my older sister's room. We're not allowed to go in there. Wait, what? That's your older sister's room? I've seen you post photos online and I thought this was your room. What? No, that's just my older sister's room and she just has good lighting. At that moment, I started started to kind of be weirded out, and I looked at her and said, wait, so where's your room? At that moment, she ends up grabbing my hand, and me and her, we end up going downstairs to a basement. And I am not joking. Once she opened that basement door, I got a good whiff of something that was a disgusting smell. Like, think of the most gross smell ever. Think of like sweaty fish, tar, like anything disgusting. That's basically what the whiff I got was. And the more I went down the steps towards the basement, I was getting more grossed out by the second. I had really no idea what was going on, but when I finally went downstairs, I started to realize what the smell was, and I instantly regretted going downstairs because I realized she had a really nice big basement spot for herself, but there was food packaging everywhere. There was left plates. There was moldy milk sitting in the corner of the room. And not only that, but I swear there was mold growing from her ceiling. Like, this definitely wasn't a girly room that no one would expect. That it was the most disgusting thing ever, to the point where I looked at her and said, wait, so this is your room? Yeah, it's a little messy, but just don't worry about it. I'm just gonna, like, you know, get ready to, like, just relax at home. Give me a second. And I remember this girl ends up going to her closet, and she just opens it straight up and starts getting changed right in front of me. And I am not joking. When she was changing, I ended up staring at her and seeing her cherries, and I'm like, damn, like, she's hot. But then out of nowhere, when she went to the bathroom and got makeup remover and took off the makeup she had, I saw her for a totally different person. Like, I am not joking. It's crazy how much makeup can change a girl in the way she looks, because this girl looked nothing like she did back at school. Like, she literally was a huge catfish IRL. And I was in major shock, to the point where I looked at her and said, do you want to work on the project? I remember she ended up finally laying on the couch, and she ended up releasing a massive sigh, as if she just took off like 30 pounds of weight on her, which I don't know how much that makeup weighed, but it definitely weighed a lot from what I'm seeing. And then I remember she ended up saying, okay, yeah, let's just do this project, dummy. Come here. And me and her, we ended up sitting down, work on the project. And I've decided that at that point, I wasn't interested in this girl anymore, because she just did not look like the girl of my dreams that I was expecting. So me trying to get the project done as fast as possible, I remember I'm just writing down everything we need to do. And basically she starts building the structure that needs to be the atom for the project that we had. And then I remember I finally ended up looking at her, and she looks at me, and I guess we had a moment where we ended up staring at each other's eyes. But in reality, I was actually staring at the pimple that was in between her eyebrows, but that's not the point. Going on, I remember when she saw I was staring at her eyes and she was staring at mine, she ended up basically leaning in and she tried to kiss me. But instead of kissing her, I ended up kind of leaning back and going, oh, sorry, I'm kind of nervous. Oh no, it's okay. You don't have to be nervous. And at that moment, she ends up basically jumping on top of me, and me being so grossed out of how this girl looked, I ended up closing my eyes, and me and her, we ended up doing the Devil's Tango. I know it's not the most ideal to do it that way, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I really had no idea what else to do. Me and her, we start basically doing the Devil's Tango. And while one thing led to another, out of nowhere, I ended up hearing her mom come downstairs, and she says, honey, what's going on down there? Like, it still smells terrible. Seriously? Get that boy out of the house. We need to get this place cleaned up. At that moment, I couldn't agree more. And I ended up pushing her off me and said, we could just finish the rest back at school. I'll see you tomorrow. And when I left, I promised myself that I would never go back into that basement. The next day at school, I remember I ended up meeting up with the boys, and they all kept asking me how I did and what happened. And I did say that I did do the Devil's Tango with her, but I majorly regretted it. All the boys were questioning why, but I didn't give them an answer, because obviously I didn't want to really invade this girl's privacy and just be a total jerk. And when I went inside my biology class, I ended up seeing her, and when I looked at her, I couldn't look at her the same. To everyone else's eyes, she was all caked up, beautiful, and the finest girl on earth. But in my eyes, well, she was that same girl in the basement. I remember when I got to my crush's place, out of nowhere, she kept telling me, oh, Bubba, I have something really cool in the garage. Do you want to go see it? Yeah, sure. Let's go check it out. And right as I go into the garage, out of nowhere, I realized that she ended up closing the door behind me and locking it. And at that moment, I realized I'm trapped in this girl's garage. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another insane but crazy story. Now, the story all starts off back when I was in high school, and this was my grade 12 year. Now, in grade 12, as you guys may know, I was a major player. But not only that, since it was my grade 12 year, I always panicked about what I was gonna do in the future. And I guess the only way I ended up relieving the stress of not knowing was basically doing the Devil's Tango. But I remember there was one time specifically in my grade 12 year where there was a girl in my school that I actually really liked. For some reason, it was something about her that made her feel like the world was normal, and every time me and her would interact with each other and hang out with each other, I could always see like a proper future with her, which is honestly something I really needed back when I was in grade 12, because I would always panic about my future. But for some reason, when I pictured her in my future, it seemed right. So I remember one day in my grade 12 year, it was right after class, and me and her, we ended up walking away from each other, and that's when my buddy walked up to me. He walked up to me and said, Bubba, bro, why don't you just like ask her out? Like, why are you making it so awkward for yourself? Just go and like say a couple things to her, man. Oh, I don't know. I think we're better as friends friends maybe. But you know that's BS. You're never just friends with girls, bro. Just like go talk to her and like ask her out. Just do it, man. So knowing that he was right, there was no way I was not gonna ask this girl out, and knowing that it was my final year with her in high school, I might as well just go up to her and ask her out. So I remember the next day when me and her, we entered the class at the same time. I remember I looked at her and she looked at me, and that's when I said, so I was wondering, are you free anytime soon? Yeah. Why? What's wrong, Baba? Oh, well, like I was wondering, and right as I was about to ask her out, the teacher ended up interrupting saying, Baba, you can take a seat now. And I didn't get to ask her out. It really sucked how the teacher ended up stopping me midway through, but at the same time, I guess she really didn't care. Because once again, to adults, high school relationships never really are a good thing. And as an adult right now, I can easily say high school relationships aren't a thing. But going on from there, I remember the whole time during class, she kept looking at me and I kept looking at her. And I guess she was trying to figure out what I was trying to ask her. But I guess she kind of also took the hint that I was trying to ask her out. So I remember she ended up passing me a note, which I know is super cringy and something you only see in like the basic high school shows back when like we were kids. But I'm gonna be honest, she ended up passing me a note. And when I received this note, I ended up reading it and it said, "Were you trying to ask me out?" Question mark. And at that moment, I ended up writing down yes, and I passed it back to her because at this point, I really did not care. Like I just wanted a straight up answer. Like the worst she can say is no. But what this girl ended up doing was something a lot worse than saying no, because she ended up sending the note back and saying yes, and to meet her up after school at the front of the school. I was like, sure, okay, bet. And at that moment, I had a smile on my face. I was really excited. I was hyped up. And obviously, you guys probably right now are happy that I ended up getting a date. But let's just say things got a lot worse than I expected. Because right as class ended and I ended up, walking down the hallway with excitement that I ended up actually finally asking out this girl that I had a crush on, my buddy walks up to me. He walks up to me and says, "Bro, Bubba, did you end up asking out that girl?" "Huh? Oh, yeah, I did actually. And to be honest, we're going on a date today after school." "Dude, that's awesome, man. What are you gonna do with her?" I'm not sure, to be honest." "Okay, well, she's right now walking right there, so you might as well go ask her what's the plan." So at that moment, I remember I ended up walking away from my friend and I walked up to her. When I walked up to her, she ended up looking at me when she turned around and smiled, and she said, "Oh, hey, so what do you want to do after school?" I'm not really sure, to be honest. I didn't really think I would get this far, is what I told her. And then she ends up telling me, "Oh, well, that's fine. I mean, it's a Friday, so I think I have a pretty good idea for us what to do." Okay. Yeah, cool. I'm down. And then she walks away. And what this girl's plan was the most insane thing ever, because I remember after school came around and I got inside my car and pulled it up in front of the school. When I did, she ended up entering the passenger seat, and me and her, we started to drive out of there. And as we were driving, I remember she looked at me and said, so are you hungry?" "I mean, I'm always hungry. Yeah. What do you want to eat?" "Oh, well, like we can go eat like, I don't know, some takeout if you're down, and take it back to my place. I have a really cool hangout spot." "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. That's not an issue. Let's go get takeout." So me and this girl, we ended up going to McDonald's, which I know is not the best place for a first date, but to be fair, we were high school kids. We didn't know any better. And we ended up getting takeout. We went through the drive-thru and we drove straight to her place. And when we finally got to her driveway, I remember she ended up taking out something out of her purse and she ended up opening the garage door. Now, this garage door that she was opening was made of steel. Like, it was like a special sort of steel that you cannot break through. It was like some sort of like crazy stuff, which to be fair, her house was like really expensive. She lived in one of those like super rich houses that only millionaires would live in. And I remember when she opened the garage, she ended up saying, "Oh, like you see there's a couch in there? Yeah, just park your car like right beside the couch in the garage and we could just chill in there with your car." You want me to park my car in your garage? Aren't your parents gonna be home anytime soon?" "What? Oh, no, they're gone for the weekend. Don't worry." Okay. So I ended up driving my car into her garage and I ended up parking in the spot where she told me to. And right when I came out of the car with her, we ended up sitting on the couch that was at the garage and we turned on the TV and just started watching a movie. Obviously, me and her were like talking a bit here and there, but something was very odd about this garage when we ended up going in there, because it was really nice, but at the same time, it felt like a steel box. Like, if it wasn't for the couch and my car and the TV, nothing else was in there. And if you like took all three of those things out of that room, I'm not gonna lie to you, it would seem like a room that you would see in a mental asylum. And honestly, it kind of freaked me out. But I tried not to make it a big deal, and I just kept, basically interacting with this girl. And well, me and her, we got really close to the point where midway through the movie, we ended up making out. And well, I think you guys know where I was going with this, but we ended up doing the Devil's Tango right on the couch. Obviously, I was really happy about it, but what happened next honestly freaked me out, because I remember midway through us doing the Devil's Tango, she ended up like grabbing my car keys out of my pocket, and then she ended up like standing up saying, "Baba, I want to do something crazy. Can you follow me for a second?" I ended up saying sure, and I ended up going to this like corner of the garage, and I saw there was like some sort of like handcuff that was like connected to the wall of the garage. When I saw this, I was like, yo, this is kind of weird. But then she ended up pushing me up against the wall, and then she made out with me, but right as she was making out with me, me. She ended up putting the handcuff on me. And at that moment, I realized what she was doing, because she ended up walking backwards and said, Bubba, I always had like an idea of like me and you being together forever. And like, I don't want you to panic, because I know in like the next 365 days of you being in here, you'll fall in love with me. At that moment, I was like, what? This girl has been watching way too many romance movies, that's for sure. But I started to panic. I kept thinking she was joking as well. So I kept saying things like, okay, like this is not funny anymore. Like unhandcuff me. Like there's no reason to do this. But this girl wasn't having it. She ended up going sitting back at the couch with my car keys. And then she ended up locking my door for my car and ended up leaving the garage. And I ended up getting stuck in the garage where there was nothing near me. There was nothing I could do to help me out. So I started to panic. Now, if you guys are probably wondering, oh, Bubba, why don't you just get your phone out? Well, I didn't have my phone on me. My phone was actually left in the car. So I guess she kind of knew what she was doing when she decided to take my car keys. Going on from there, though, I remember I was really upset, and I was actually there for like 4 hours. She didn't come into the garage. She didn't check in on me. And I was surprised, because when you have someone imprisoned, like you got to have someone watching over, right? So I remember I kept like looking around the room, and that's when I realized in the corner of the room, there was a security camera watching me. I kept waving at the security camera in panic, thinking that maybe her parents might figure out that I'm stuck in there. But no, she ended up seeing me waving through the security camera, walked into the room and said, Bubba, are you okay? Like, why do you keep waving at the camera? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? You locked me in your own garage. Like, what do you think? I'm trapped in here. Bubba, like I said, just it'll take some time, but you'll prefer to be in here. Trust me. Are you nuts? Is what I told her. And I started to freak out. The only thing I was really close to somewhat was my vehicle, but I didn't have the keys. Anyways, another 4 hours went by, and officially I was in there for 8 hours straight. I was really upset. I was super annoyed. And honestly, I was actually really hardcore panicking, to the point where I remember as I was panicking though, luckily the girl ended up walking back into the room, the crush that I guess always wanted, but now really did not want. And she ended up handing me a plate of food. The food she gave me, by the way, was a bowl of mac and cheese. And I love mac and cheese, but not in a garage that was freezing cold. Like, I was super upset. But I remember I started eating the food, and I kept asking her, do you really think like this is gonna work? Like, you locking me in here? Like, you know someone's eventually gonna have to come here and get me, right? Oh, Bubba, you don't understand. No one comes into the garage. This is my hangout spot. And then she just ended up walking out of the room. At that moment, I kept thinking of ways for me to get out of that place. And that's when I realized the bowl that she gave me for mac and cheese was like this heavy metal steel bowl. And the only thing that was somewhat close to me was my own car. So I guess you guys know where I was going with this, but I ended up getting that bowl. I threw it as hard as I could at the car. And that's when the car alarm went off. I remember a car started going off, going beep, 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 and started like panicking. And me worried that the girl was just gonna come back into the garage and just turn it off with my car key. Surprisingly, she didn't. So this car alarms just kept going off for like a good like 30 minutes. And finally, I ended up hearing cop sirens come down and park in front of the garage. And then that's when I ended up hearing some voices go on saying, ma'am, there's a vehicle in there that keeps going off. Can we please check it in there? Oh, it's nothing. You don't need to go in there. There's literally nothing going on in there. It's just my car what just kept going off. It's fine. And obviously for some reason the cops weren't taking it. So they ended up opening the garage door. And once they opened it, they saw me handcuffed to the corner, and they knew instantly what was going on. She ended up getting arrested, and I ended up going home that day. But the cop ended up telling me, sometimes there's some women you don't want to go near. And this was one of them. And I remember as I was hiding in my crush's closet, out of nowhere, I ended up seeing her walk into her room, and I was freaking out. Sitting there in the closet, trying not to make a single sound. And at that moment, I realized I was trapped in my own crush's closet. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another insane but embarrassing story. So this story all takes place back when I was in middle school, and I was in grade 7. Now, grade 7 for me was actually pretty interesting. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was a really basic kid, and honestly, I was a helpless romantic. I remember all throughout my middle school years, actually, funny enough, I only had one girl that I had a major crush on. And it was pretty well known throughout the guys in my school that I had a crush on this girl. But for her, I guess she was pretty oblivious. But I remember one day when I entered inside my school, I was sitting down writing in my journal as I was heading to class. If you guys don't know, back when I was in middle school, I had a journal that I basically wrote everything in. And yes, it was a journal, not a diary. I know how many people can get that confused, so trust me on this, it was just a journal. And basically with this journal, I remember as I was writing down in it, my buddy ends up walking up to me saying, yo, Bubba, what are you writing? Oh, nothing, don't worry about it. When in reality, I was actually writing about my crush. And I remember this wasn't the first time I wrote about my crush in my journal, and my buddy actually knows that I had a journal, and he always would make fun of me about writing in it. Because let's be real here, he would always call it a diary. Anyways, I remember as he was asking me questions about the journal, he ended up grabbing it out of my hand, and he ended up saying, Bubba, what? Are you writing about your crush again? Dude, give it back, is what I told him, and he ended up giving it back to me. I remember he kept telling me how I should just tell her the truth and just tell her that I like this girl, but honestly, I had no confidence whatsoever back when I was in grade 7 to actually go do that. And when we entered inside the classroom, we ended up all sitting down, and that's when class started. I remember even seeing my crush walk into the classroom when class started, and honestly, I couldn't get my eyes off her. If anything, like I said earlier, I was a helpless romantic, so every time I saw her, it was the only thing I could think about. That probably makes sense why my grades weren't so good, but it is what it is. Anyways, when class was about to end, I remember I quickly had to go to the bathroom, so I got up and left, and as I left, I remember when I got back from going to the bathroom, I ended up just packing my things and going home. And when I got home, I noticed the one thing that wasn't in my bag, and this thing was the most important thing in my life at the time, and that was my journal. For some reason, it wasn't there, and the last place I remember putting it was in my desk at school. So in my mind, I thought, okay, you know, it probably is at school. I can just go tomorrow, pick it up, and act like nothing happened. And I remember part of me, for some reason, just had a bad gut feeling. Like, you know that feeling when you get butterflies in your stomach that something bad's about to happen? Well, I had that feeling, but I tried my best to ignore it. And the next day, when I went to school early to go to my desk, I realized that my journal wasn't there. I was super confused on why, and I remember looking all over my desk and even taking everything out of my desk to see if I could find it, but it wasn't there. At that moment, I started to panic because I started thinking about if someone took my journal and they have access to all my crazy thoughts and all my secrets in life almost. So as I was panicking inside the classroom, class ended up starting and the bell rang, and everyone started to come into the classroom, seeing me totally empty out my desk and making a giant mess. It got to the point where my friend that, you know, I hung out with yesterday, the day before, he ended up walking up to me saying, "Bubba, why are you making a mess, bro? What happened?" "Dude, I can't find it." "Find what?" "My journal, bro. Like, I can't find it anywhere." "Wait, what? You didn't get it back?" "What do you mean get it back?" And that's when I realized my friend ended up telling me that he put my journal inside my crush's backpack, so it would be like a way for me to confess my feelings to her. I remember at that moment, I started to panic. I started to freak out, and I even almost ended up yelling at him. But obviously, before I did that, though, my crush ended up walking in, and I knew I had to figure out where my crush put my journal. I ended up asking my friend as well where he put my journal. He said he put it in her backpack, so I didn't think too much of it. And that whole day, I remember I was so nervous and freaking out inside about my journal being with my crush that I had no confidence whatsoever to go up to my crush and even ask her about it. For some reason, ever since I was a kid, and even now, I always had like a nervousness of like walking up to people and asking them for things. So I remember I always like kind of like held back, and even at lunchtime when I was about to walk up to her, I got super nervous because, well, she was my crush and I had no way to walk up to her. Anyways, one thing led to another, and the school day finally ended. And me, I just knew inside that I was worried because, well, since I didn't walk up to her, she was gonna go home and I wasn't gonna have my journal. So I remember I made up a plan to basically follow my crush after school and follow her home, which sounds really creepy, but to be honest, I was a kid back then, so I didn't really have that mindset, I guess, that it would be weird to do that. But I remember I ended up following her home, and when I saw and figured out where she lived, I ended up hiding and waiting until she got inside. And at that moment, I knew that I had to break into my crush's house and basically grab my journal. If you guys are wondering why I just didn't wait the next day at school, well, it was a Friday, so there was no possible way that school was going to be on the weekend, and there was no possible way for me to actually talk to her since I was so nervous. So I remember as time ended up going by, I waited like extra 20 minutes outside her place, and that's when I decided to break into her house. If you guys are wondering how I broke in, well, I ended up looking around the house and ended up figuring out which one was her window, and I ended up opening her window. For some reason, the house back where she lived at was really easy to open the windows for, so I ended up opening the window and I snuck inside her bedroom. When I got inside, I was so scared. Like, you have no idea. It is not actually easy to break and enter into someone's place. And no, do not try it. This is a warning, okay? I was a dumb kid back then. Don't do what I do in these stories. But anyways, as I was in her room, I knew that I had to get my journal, so I ended up looking around. I started looking, you know, inside her cabinet to looking inside her closet. And when I opened her closet, I saw her backpack. And that's when I grabbed her backpack and opened it, and I finally found my journal. I guess my crush never opens her backpack because knowing that I was in there for almost 2 days is totally insane. But I ended up grabbing my journal, but right as I grab it out of her bag, I ended up hearing noises of someone entering her bedroom, and I thought it was my crush, so I ended up jumping inside my crush's closet, and I sat in there trying not to breathe. My crush ended up walking in and getting changed, and honestly, me sitting in her closet, I was totally terrified. And knowing that she was right in front of me really wasn't a good idea. Like, there was no way I was gonna just come out of her closet and see her inside her own place without her knowing that I was there in the first place. Like, I didn't want my crush to know I broke into her place, okay? Like, I really did not know what to do here. So me, as I was freaking out, panicking, sitting in her closet, I remember I sat and waited inside her closet until she would leave her bedroom so I can have the golden opportunity to leave her place. But for some reason, no matter what, my crush just would not leave her room. No joke, she went from sleeping on her bed to sitting on her desk doing homework and would just be on her laptop listening to music and watching One Direction videos. Yeah, I don't know. My crush did a lot of things that day that I never thought she would ever do. But honestly, as I was sitting in her closet, I'm not joking, I ended up getting really hungry and super tired. To the point where I was actually considering passing out in her closet and sleeping in there for the night. But luckily, I ended up hearing my crush's mom calling her name, and that was the one time she ended up leaving her room. And knowing that this was my only only opportunity to leave her room, I ended up getting out of her closet and I ended up opening the window as fast as I could and leaving. But right before I could close the window, as I was outside, my crush ended up walking into her room, and instead of closing it, I just sprinted away as fast as I could with my journal. I ended up running home, and I remember at the time when I got home, it was like, I want to say around 11:30 at night. And when I remember when I got home, my mom ends up looking at me super upset saying, Baba, where are you? Where'd you go? Sorry, Mom. I was hanging out with friends. What do you mean, Baba? You don't have friends. Thanks, Mom. Thanks. And I remember I ended up just going downstairs and writing in my journal this exact crazy story that happened to me. Honestly, to this day, I'm still surprised that my crush never ended up finding my journal. And the next day afterwards, trust me, I ended up yelling at my friend for a good hour at lunchtime just because of his crazy idea for confessing my love to my crush that way. But honestly, what would you guys do in my situation? Would you guys break into your crush's house? Because if you guys would, then fall for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.